Brilliant, right, okay, welcome folks. Future Work Scotland. I'm Sath, your host for this session. I'm joined by Donald Henderson, my co-host. Just usual formalities, we do have a code of conduct. In short, we just ask that you're respectful to one another, everyone have a great experience. We are recording the session, so if you're not comfortable with your camera on, feel free to keep it off. Paul's also going to do something a little bit more interactive this evening. We'd expect that if we're going to do a little bit of improv, so we will be getting you kind of doing things, so breakouts, etc. So again, if you're not comfortable doing that, you're not obligated to do so. You can stay in the main chair, hang out with Paul and Donald and I. Small group, so should be cool. And yeah, delighted to have Paul join us for this session. Really looking forward to learning more about improv with him. Paul's been he's been in the scene for some years now. I think he's been a certified scrum trainer since about 2006. He's one of very few, I think a handful of enterprise coaches, and he's also the author of this awesome book, which I have here. So I'm sure he's going to go on and help us learn more about some of these techniques and help us apply them. I'm keen to see how they work virtually. So yeah, really looking forward to it. And yeah, thanks for joining us, Paul, and welcome. And yeah, over to your good self.
Thanks, Seth. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Hope you're all well. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm just going to share a few. My plan is to go through, race through a few different theories and stories from the world of improv. Let you have a go. It wouldn't. I was saying to Seth and Donald before we started that it would be a bit odd me doing an improv session without some level of audience participation. So. Feel free, as Seth said, to join in as much or as little as you want to. A few things about how and Tobias was just asking how I'm doing some of my improv stuff online. Zoom is a great tool to do that, and I'm really pleased that Seth and Donald are using Zoom, else I'd be lost now if it wasn't using the Zoom product. And a lot of these games may well work better if you are in gallery view. So at home, if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, top right hand corner of the screen, make sure you're looking at the gallery view where you should see as many people as you can fit onto your screen. That will probably help. And at certain points, if you do want to play the game, we'll be using your camera on, camera off function, and maybe even the mute, unmute function as well, just to vary kind of your involvement and your participation in the games. As Seth said, just to remind you, all of these things are completely optional. It would be great, however, if you did want to play along with your cameras on. It would be lovely to see you. So feel free to join in if you're happy to join in those games. All right, so let's have a look. I'm just going to share. I should be able to share my screen now, hopefully. Hopefully you can see that. Give me a few thumbs up on cameras if you can see that. Brilliant. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to make sure I can still see you.
Yeah, we see the product placement.
Yeah, well, Sath's already flashed up on camera once, so if you don't buy this book by the end of this, I'm not doing my job right.
But I already have it.
Oh no, you have to buy a copy for someone else to run.
No.
No, I'm joking. This is a photo of me that's what my hair should look like. This is what it looks like after 3 months of lockdown. Mm-hmm. So yeah, apologies for that, but yeah, but welcome and thank you very much, and Sath's done a lovely introduction. So this is going to be a little bit of planning for about 45 minutes or so of talking through some improv concepts on which I based my book and the chapters of my book. I've got a couple of games I'd like to throw in there just to show you how I've using some of these techniques. And at the end, we'll have a bit of time for some questions. I'd love to try and answer some of your questions around how I apply improv to what I do, especially the connection between improv and agile coaching. That was what really got me started on this whole journey when I wrote my book back in 2015 it was I went to a lot of different improv shows and a lot of different, spoke to a lot of different improvisers. And I was amazed by the parallels between both improvisational theatre and agile development and agile coaching, what I was very much two of my passions there. So that's really where the idea of the book came from. And this course and this little workshop here that we're going to do is very much based around the content of the book. A few myths I'd like to try and dispel before we start about improvisation, really. And that's that the things that I'm not expecting you to bring with you. You don't have to be a comic to be able to learn or to use improvisation. You might know a lot of the history and have seen improvised comedy on the television, but certainly the principles that I'll go through are not actually, they come from something prior to the comedy that you'll have seen on television or in the theatre. The principles actually come from storytelling techniques and teaching young children English as a second language. So there's lots of benefits here from a kind of non-comedy point of view. So you don't have to be a particularly funny person to be part of to enjoy improvisation. The second thing is I'm not expecting you to be particularly creative or original. Again, one of the big misconceptions is, oh, I can't improvise because I can't think of things on the spot. I'm not a very creative person. That's not necessarily the case. Great improvisers are usually people that allow other people to be creative, not necessarily people yourself. And the third thing is that it's just chaos. It looks like it might be chaos on stage, but in fact, what I learned from improvisation is that actors are using actually a very strict discipline and an ethos to how they work, very similar to how agile teams work. Underlying principles, trying to accept offers that are around them and trying to enable their other actors on stage. There is actually more discipline than you might think. Very short history lesson. Two of my inspirations behind improv. On the left, Viola Spolin, and she was very much brought the idea, the concepts of improvisation to storytelling techniques and to short drama games for children in the US in the 1920s. And she was teaching young children who couldn't speak English as a first language. She was teaching young immigrant children how to basically communicate through telling stories and these types of games. And Spolin's work was firstly taken into what became the Second City Theatre Company in Chicago. That's where comedy theatre, improv theatre, tended to began in the 30s in the US. I took most of my inspiration, that's an old photo of me there, with a gentleman called Keith Johnston. And Keith, very much a driving force behind using improvisational techniques, not necessarily for comedy effect at all, but to teach drama students how to be comfortable and spontaneous on stage. So a lot of the games that you'll see me walking through and talking through tonight are actually based on a lot of Keith's work. And he was a huge inspiration to me when I was lucky enough to go on a workshop with him back in 2014, I think it was. So the 5 things I'm going to attempt to race through for you this evening, a little taste of the 5 chapters of my book, the 5 modules of my improv training course: safety, spontaneity, storytelling, status, and sensitivity. Like I say, my desire is to try and give you a little bit of exposure to why these 5 elements of improvisation can be so useful to us as agile practitioners and agile coaches. Starting with safety. And we're going to play a game as best we can. I'll just give you the quick outline of the game. Then I'm going to switch my slides off, and we're going to attempt to play that game using the gallery view in Zoom, if we're up for that. In this game, it's called Anyone Who. In this game, any player can state a fact about themselves, which may uncover some similarities with other players in the game. Players start their fact with the words anyone who. And we play this by everyone having their cameras off to begin with, and players start by switching their camera on. Okay. If you share the fact that the speaker says, you also switch your camera on. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to justify why you put your camera on. You just literally switch your camera on. All right. And then the idea is, in the game moves on to another speaker based on someone else will ask another question, anyone who, and they'll add something else to the game. Okay. So for instance, if I said anyone who is using a standing desk, because for instance, I'm using a standing desk at the moment, you would turn your camera on and I would see other people who are using a standing desk at the moment, and then we turn our cameras back off again. Okay. Happy to play the game? Happy to give it a go? So we all start with our cameras off. People who are joining are going to wonder what on earth is going on right now.
And you may want to stop screen share so we can see.
Yes,
others.
you're right. Good. Thank you, Sylvain. Thank you. There we go. Is that better?
Absolutely.
Right. So hopefully, and if Roger's just joined, he's got no idea what's going on, but we're all in gallery view. And the idea is that we'll start with, if I start, I'll put my camera on just to get things going. And I'll say a truth about myself. I'll say, anyone who is currently on the GMT time zone, currently on GMT time zone, if that's true of you, you would switch your camera on. And I can see several other people turn the camera on. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, and I'll switch my camera off.
Have a video on because I'm GMT +1, so it's very near.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, not technically GMT. So I'm sorry, yeah, leave your camera off at this point. But okay, you might get a chance to play in a moment. So turn your camera back off, and then if you'd like to play the game, turn your camera on and start with an anyone who, and then we'll see if anyone would like to go next. You'll have to turn your microphone on as well, Laura, sorry.
Sorry, is anybody else able to speak some French?
Anyone who can speak French?
Enchanté.
Very good.
Plaisir.
Very good. And then cameras back off. And anyone else like to join in? But you do need to be off mute, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, anyone likes climbing or hiking in the mountains? I like doing it until, let's say, I have an objective to summit 14,000 meters per year, let's say.
Very good. Excellent. And cameras back off. Anyone else want to join in? But you were, again, sorry, you wanted microphones on.
Anyone who's got children is a parent. Quite a lot.
Excellent. Cameras off. Can't hear you, Silvana, sorry.
Anyone who's learned something new since the lockdowns. Oh, lovely company.
Great. And just maybe one more. Anyone else want to have a go?
Anyone who found out about this event today?
It's you, Roger.
Okay, and that will be end of the game. So you can turn your cameras back on if you'd rather have your cameras on. That is the end of the game. So we're going to carry on there. Normally, I'd ask you for some feedback, but I think we'll perhaps let you kind of hold some of those thoughts for now, and we'll come back and have some thoughts, some feedback at the end of the course, end of the talk, as to what you learned from that game and what you pulled out of it. This first chapter for me on safety, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Is those games for me certainly are a little bit about that, sharing that little bit of vulnerability. I'll share my screen. Just realized I'm not doing that. Hopefully you can see that I'm sharing another screen. So you might have recognized this triangle before. This is from Patrick Lencioni's work on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And an interesting book that I read many years ago, but it's really that fundamental layer there that Lencioni talks about, is this absence of trust. and the appearance of being invulnerable. So for me, games like that are very much around trying to encourage people to feel comfortable with sharing something about themselves. And hopefully, but not in every case, but hopefully that there may be something that you feel only you are feeling right now, or only is very unique to you, but it might be something that someone else in your team has experienced in the past. And that might be that little bit of common ground that we need to start building on that trust, and we can start to build that real sense of team on top of that. Okay. So that's a little bit on safety. Like I say, a very quick game on safety, and I'll be interested to hear some of your thoughts at the end of that. I'm going to race on to chapter number 2, or section number 2 here, which is spontaneity. And we're going to dabble a little bit with this tonight by I've put Donald and Sath under a little bit of pressure to experiment with some Zoom features here in terms of some breakout rooms. And we're going to invite you, if you'd like to play, into a little breakout room game now, which is probably the most famous or most familiar improv game that I've played, and that many of you may well be aware of before, which is one-word storytelling. It's very simple. You're in a small group, you're going to tell a story one word at a time by passing the story around a virtual circle as you go in your breakout room. With the nature of breakout rooms, it might not be completely obvious as to what the circle is, because if you're in gallery view, you might see people in different screens in different orders. So I suggest when you are in your breakout rooms, just decide an order in terms of 1, 2, 3, who's going to speak in that order. But the idea is that you'd only speak one word at a time before you pass on to the next person. All right. If you do feel like you've reached the end of a sentence, you can just start the next sentence, try and make the story flow naturally as you would do with normal speech. And the aim of the game is to try and, if you can, be as spontaneous as you can. Hence the game is about spontaneity. And they don't realize this yet, but Sath and Donald are now going to demonstrate this for me. If I go first and Sath, you go second, and Donald, you go third, we will just demonstrate how the start of the story works at the bottom of the screen there that you can hopefully see. If I say "the," Sath would say.
Oh, I don't know. What are you asking of me?
So on the screen, Sath, can you see that at the bottom of the screen there's a sentence, the start of the story, but it's one word at a time. So if I'm first, you're second, and Donald's third, I'd say "the," you'd say
"they."
Donald would say
"we."
Went.
You say "they."
"You."
So good to know. Good to know the hosts are really on board with the idea. Thank you very much, guys. Great demonstration.
Or bad.
But hopefully the rest of you get the gist. One word at a time. Decide the order you're going to speak in, and when you're in your breakout rooms, see if you can continue that story from those 7 words. The day we went to the forest, and see where your story goes. All right. So Sath, if you're happy, groups of 3, if that works. See if we can set up a few breakout rooms. 3 or 4 would be fine.
That's fine. There I go. 4. Right, I'm going to open these rooms now.
Excellent. Is that everyone? Everyone back in the room?
I believe so.
Missing anyone?
No, I've closed them, so I think you're good.
All right. Just give me a quick show of hands if anyone's story ended up somewhere different than the forest. No, no one ventured beyond the forest. No, nothing went to a different place rather than a forest. Okay. All right. We might it would be nice to compare some stories about the forest and what happened in your stories when we came back.
Well, we did not address the forest part. We were in the bushes.
Oh, okay. In the bushes. All right. Did something exciting happen to Varna in the bushes, or was there any type of enemy, a villain, a monster?
Oh, we had an attacking squirrel.
An attacking squirrel, of course. Very good. Excellent. Very good. All right. Let me just.
We had a 10-headed serpent or snake.
Really?
with five legs. Yeah.
A snake with legs? That's proper scary. Very scary. Excellent. So a little bit there in terms of, I'm interested in terms of how did the conversation flow? Was there any kind of long, awkward silences for anyone in that one? Or did it appear to flow quite quickly?
There were some awkward silences. There were some struggles. Yeah, we got a bit stuck. Partly the sound quality sometimes threw us off. We thought we heard one thing, but it was another thing.
Yeah.
That caused a bit.
Again, yeah, one of the limitations of Zoom, you are relying on a decent kind of audio connection. I completely sympathize. And sometimes that's where the joy comes. I remember speaking to a lot of improvisers about this. It's when someone mishears a word or misinterprets a word, and you just got to go with it. You just you can't ask them to repeat. You just got to, whatever you heard is good enough. And that's kind of that believing in whatever offer you've been given is kind of something you've got to work with. What the great improvisers would be able to do, because you can kind of imagine that the audience has probably heard it as well if they're on stage. So this the yes and, hopefully again I'm sharing this on screen, you can see this. This is still one of the most basic but one of the most beautiful, I think, concepts within improvisation, which many of you will have come across before, even if you don't realize where it's come from. But the notion of the basic ethos, and the improvisers are looking for opportunities to say yes. And not to say that they say yes to everything, but certainly they're looking for opportunities to add, to accept, and to add to that conversation and to that story and to that narrative, that scenario, whatever they're working within. And when we can adopt this kind of yes and approach, we can generally find the flow of our ideas might increase. And the reason why I've got this spontaneity element here after the safety element is I think that spontaneity is very much founded in a safe environment. We're much more likely to feel much more spontaneous, that our flow of ideas can increase if we feel we're not going to be judged, or if we feel we're not going to be kind of analyzed in terms of the words or the flow that we're coming up with. Trying to limit some of those filters that are built in, those awkward silences, maybe where people are filtering ideas, or those what they think, it's not particularly great, or it's not particularly original. But as an improviser will know, you don't have to always have the original idea to allow the next great idea to emerge. You just got to be able to connect. And it's not always about creating, sometimes it's just about connecting things. Excellent, good stuff. Okay, moving on, because I'm conscious of the time. So storytelling, part 3. So you were telling a story there, albeit one word at a time. You might have found, like I say, some of the conversation or the storytelling was a little bit disjointed, a few more awkward silences in there. And I'm interested in, did you feel it was a really kind of enthralling story? Did it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Or did it just end when the breakout room brought you back to the main session? Laurie's nodding at me, but yeah. So improvisers have this uncanny knack to create a story unscripted in a time period. So if they know they've got an hour on stage, they're able to piece together a story that somehow has a beginning, middle, and an end, and doesn't drag on, and the audience love it, and they walk away at the time that they were supposed to finish. It's an incredible skill. So I did a lot of research behind storytelling, and storytelling a massive part of business now in terms of trying to increase engagement. This is what's more commonly known as the dramatic arc, or historically known as Gustav Freytag's pyramid, which is a 19th century German playwright, Gustav Freytag, his attempt and his understanding of how to increase audience engagement through actors on stage by going through, I think there's 7 stages he said you go through in terms of telling a story. Some kind of build up of tension, of drama, where you reach some kind of climax, some kind of cliffhanger moment, and then the drama decreases and you get the resolution, the story ends in some kind of new reality. so famous and so popular, most Hollywood films still use this kind of dramatic arc to tell a story where there is a main protagonist that you're following. And this is what keeps you in that cinema screen or in front of a film on Netflix for 2 hours watching a film. So I thought that was an interesting element. Several storytelling games, which I'm not going to do here today, but great improvisers that I've worked with have given me loads of different clues on just ways and little structures on how to tell stories effectively, even when you don't have a script. My favorite one is probably something called a story spine, which is on the left-hand side here. The story spine is basically the beginning of a set of 8 sentences that describe the dramatic arc. And basically, an improviser will be using that structure to tell a story on stage. This is one of perhaps the best examples of where I've taken that game and reimagined it and used it. And I usually use this with product owners and scrum teams to try and help them think about the story of this sprint before the sprint has started. So again, looking at the right-hand side there to try and devolve a sprint goal. Once upon a time, there was a user, or maybe it's even a person, a persona that we can tie this to. Every day that user faces this problem until now, until this sprint planning session. And we leave that middle part, that dramatic, the climax of this story, we leave that blank for the moment. But we focus on the end of the story from a product owner's perspective until finally the user can solve this problem. And ever since then, the user gets this benefit. And obviously we'll be trying to add some color in there so that the team can appreciate what's actually going on for that user at that point. And I've taken this with some product owners into their planning sessions. And then you allow the development team to actually come up with the middle of the story. So if that's the beginning and the end of our story, how can we connect the beginning to the end based on what's in our product backlog or based on what solutions or features we can provide, maybe even things that we haven't even thought of yet that might actually solve that user's problem. So trying to use those story structures as product owners, trying to use them to increase connection and engagement between development teams and real people, real humans, real customers. That's one of the ways I've used storytelling. It's a great way to communicate, a great way to get your message across. And this is a little challenge for you. Not going to do it as a game as such, but it was a storytelling challenge. If any of you feel you want to take this on, maybe not right now, but maybe while this the rest of this chat goes on. This was a great story. I've put Ernest Hemingway maybe because it's a legendary story. I don't really know if it's true, but the story behind this was Ernest Hemingway was challenged by his friends in a restaurant to try and write a story in 6 words when they were all drunk in a restaurant eating a meal. And he took that bet. It was for like $100 or something, a bet. And he took the bet and he writes 6 words on the back of a napkin: for sale, baby shoes never worn. So it's amazing how much just 6 words can give you that whole, in your mind, you can make connections about what that story is all about in just 6 words. And my challenge for you, if you'd like a storytelling challenge, you don't have to read it out and you don't have to share it if you don't want to at all. But between now and when this little chat ends, can you come up with a story in 6 words that has that kind of beginning, middle, and an end? And if you're happy to share it, feel free to post it in the Zoom chat or into the meetup comments after we finish today. 6 word storytelling challenge. Again, that's another game that I've played with some of my improv agile teams as well. Okay, a couple of sections left then, and then we'll get on to some Q&A. Part 4 is status. Status, big thing that Keith Johnson talks a lot about. And status is very much how you present yourself and the body language behind how you act and how you change a situation and change a scene. And Keith Johnson once told me that you don't have to always come up with a new idea. You've just got to change the relationship, which is what he talks about a lot. Changing how you, maybe even just as simple as how you stand and how you interact with other people, your behavior, and how much that can promote spontaneous ideas and creative flow. This is perhaps, again, the best example I've come up with of how to show you what improvisers would determine as low and high status, playing low or high status on stage. Two actors that hopefully some of you will recognize. But in two photos, it shows you the difference in what Keith Johnson would refer to as a subtle status change, which increases a storytelling, a narrative. Something's happened, and audiences are attracted. We're attracted to that change in the relationship. Stan Laurel on the left generally plays low status on screen. He's generally a smaller chap anyway. He generally doesn't make a lot of eye contact with the camera. Keith Johnson would say kind of anything with your hand around your mouth kind of plays this low status, kind of almost inferior, quite cowardly role. Whereas on the other side of that, you've got Oliver Hardy there, much more eye contact with the camera, generally a bigger posture, the way he's holding himself, and just that knowing look of has one up on his colleague in this sense. What Keith Johnson talks about a lot is this status switch. So this isn't a massive status switch. This isn't a complete shift in status, but it's a subtle shift in status. I've tried to show you that there on the second photograph underneath, where Stan Laurel was lighting a flame from his finger. He has something, he has knowledge in this case that Oliver Hardy doesn't have. The status has switched. Very small change in status, which has allowed that story, that interaction to blossom. That's where you get engagement. And I've seen status. We see status on a daily basis in the agile teams that we work with. In any team, in any business environment, we have high status and low status in play all the time. And I've seen, and I try and encourage, it's one of the more advanced skills that I teach, but trying to encourage Scrum Masters, product owners, team members to be conscious of their status and how they can change their status by what they say, by how they act, just by how they go about their day-to-day work. And we can make slight adjustments, perhaps lowering our status to allow teams to take higher status, particularly for Scrum Masters, servant leaders, when we're trying to actually encourage people to take on extra responsibility. If we're high status, those teams are going to find it hard to do that. So I have some really interesting conversations with teams around what the small things we can do to try and be conscious and to change our status approach with who we work with on a daily basis. And finally then, part 5, the final part, is sensitivity. And I think at the moment I'm just going to go straight into a game with this one. And I'd like to talk about sensitivity afterwards, but it very much starts with a game, which is very much based on, again, audience participation, all in the main room. We're not going to go back into breakout rooms for this, but I would like, if anyone is keen, based on the amount of audience participation we've had so far, if anyone would like to play this game, I do need 3 volunteers. If anyone would feel up for the challenge, I'm looking for 3 volunteers to play this last game. I'll introduce the game first, then you can decide. It's called the 3-Headed Expert. All right. Now, 3 of you, lovely volunteers, are going to play the role of an expert being interviewed for a TV show. But the expert can only answer 1 word at a time. They're going to be asked questions by me in this case. I'll play the role of the interviewer. But the expert is going to be played by 3 people, and you've got to supply 1 word at a time in sequence, a bit like you did with the 1-word storytelling. But in this case, you'll be answering questions that I'm going to be fielding you rather than telling a story. Based on that, would anyone like to have a go? Raise your hand or shout, turn your microphone on so we can see you. Laurie's put his hand up. Laura's put her hand up. Anyone else? That's 2. I need 1 more volunteer. Is Shelby kind of, you got an itch there, Shelby, or no? She's saying stop, don't do that.
Go on then, I'll do it.
All right. So in the order that you volunteered, Laurie, you're going to go first. You'll have word number 1. Laura, you're going to have word number 2. And Shelby, you've got word number 3. But then we loop back round, depending on, there might be multiple words in your answer. You've just got to keep that flow and answer the questions that I give you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask the rest of you, if you're not playing this game, to flick your cameras to off, to represent an audience that we can't see. So we will take a little bit of the
Do you want to stop your? You want to stop your share?
Oh yes, thank you for reminding me again. Brilliant. There we go. Don't need the instructions. You're very much with me now. All right. So yeah, if you're not playing, you can just be the audience. And we do have some audience suggestions that we need for any improv game. What we need first of all is we need an animal. Any animal. Shout out the name of an animal. Someone from the audience. What was that?
Tiger.
Tiger. I heard a tiger. And the second thing we need is an Olympic sport from someone else. Olympic sport.
Bobsledding.
Say again.
Bobsledding.
Bobsledding. A winter Olympic sport. Very good. Very niche. Like it. Very good. Well, audience, I'm very pleased to announce you're very lucky tonight, because we've flown in an expert amidst all this COVID problems. We've managed to locate an expert for you tonight, Dr. Gustav Gustafsson, who's going to be talking to us at length about their knowledge and their expertise in tigers who bobsleigh to an Olympic standard. It's quite an incredible feat. I'd just like to welcome, round of applause, welcome, and I'd like you to welcome you here tonight. So, Doctor, it's great to have you here. How are you?
Hi.
You need microphone on, Laura, for this one.
Hi.
Okay, I think that was a greeting. Good evening to you. Tell me and the audience, it's a fascinating story. How did you get started with teaching tigers, this obscure sport?
One
A.
I
was
Thinking
about
tigers
and
how
agile
they
aren't.
Okay, so they're not, that probably doesn't help. Is that so? Is it more about the speed? Is it about pure speed?
they
are
Technically,
quicker
when
bobsleighing.
Okay, so and why? See, I mean, what do you put something out in front? Are they chasing something? Is that what generates the speed?
we
think
They
love
to
bobsleigh.
chasing
oh sorry I didn't catch that word.
I was chasing.
Chasing rabbits.
Ah, rabbits, of course, yes. And it's an interesting story. So, how many tigers are in a typical tiger bobsled team at any one time?
they
Usually
Run
in
with
2
3
friends
two or three friends. So they get on. It's important. Yeah, they're a team. They do need to get on. And what's the? It's a lovely story, but tell us the name of your favorite tiger. I think you've got a favorite, haven't you? What's the name of your favorite tiger?
her
sorry
her
It was
her name
is
Gladys.
Gladys. That's lovely, lovely. And I know you're hoping for the next Winter Olympics. It's going to be quite an event. Who do you see as your main rivals in the tiger bobsled event?
The
Leaders.
Of the Wild West. 2 words.
That's why 4 words, isn't it?
Yes.
Go on, carry on.
are
Scotland.
Oh, Scotland, of course. Oh, of course. Massive bobsledding nation. So, especially with tigers, there's many tigers roaming around the Scottish countryside, and as we know. So, it's great to have you here. I know I'm not going to let you leave without you have written a book, and I'm sure we'll share that book title with all our audience before they depart tonight. But what was lovely at the end of the book was the poem that you wrote about your work with tigers, and I'd just like you to perhaps to finish tonight with the final line of that poem. It's quite moving. Over to you.
sliding
Tigers.
Bobsleighing.
down
Monroe's.
Street.
crash
Bang.
Wallop.
Well done. Give yourselves a round of applause. Well done. 9 seconds there of rousing applause. Well done. Thank you, Shelby, Laura, and Laurie. Brilliant. Thank you very much for playing a part. And the rest of you, you're welcome back in the room now. And yeah, very good. A couple of final thoughts from me, and then I'll hand over for some questions. But let me just share with you my thoughts on it. This is about sensitivity, and hopefully you can see my screen again. This is what improvisers call being in the moment. And I'm not sure if Laurie or Shelby experienced this then, but where you can completely immerse yourself in that kind of story, in that kind of scenario. And there's a few different skills I talk about in my workshops about increasing certainly listening skills, especially with Zoom and the audio quality that we've got. You've got to be pretty sharp and pretty tuned into what your improvisers are saying, and what even just the inflection they're putting on certain words, that might help. So certainly tuning our listening skills and even our vocal skills to help each other out. Something which doesn't get talked about a lot is memory. I think improvisers certainly are having to recall previous elements of the story. The name of the tiger, which I'm sure you remember, was
Gladys.
Very good, Shelby. Gladys. So trying to reintroduce Gladys as a character into the remainder of our story is what the audience enjoy and what they want to be part of. Observation skills. So that's that status difference there. You can even play around with this game where you've not just got to be saying the right words in the right order, but you'd have to actually mimic the body language and the actions of your 2 other expert heads to try and make sure you're mimicking the same hand movements and whatever that might be. And the part that we don't perhaps give enough time for is emotional awareness. And improvisers play a lot of games based on emotions and vary widen their ability and their range by taking on different emotions for different games, different characters. And I think there's a lot to be gained from development teams becoming much more aware of their emotions and how they felt within certain situations, and being able to see. If you want to increase empathy, you've got to be able to see the same emotion in yourself before you can see it in someone else. So I think that's an important skill that we can start to learn as well. So there we have it. That's the 5 elements: safety, spontaneity, storytelling, status, and sensitivity. If you are interested in a bit more of each of those 5 parts, I am running my 5-part improv course, which starts at the end of April. More details on my website, which I'm sure it's not there, is it? But I'm sure we'll send you the details to that website before we finish. And there is a discount code, of course, if any of you are interested in learning a bit more about that, you're welcome to use that very unique discount code for any of your membership here. You're more than welcome to join me on my next course. It's a 5-week course. It's a run over a lunchtime, 90 minutes a week for 5 weeks. I think it's on a Thursday lunchtime. So yeah, you're more than welcome to join us. And I'll be happy if you've got any questions take any questions.
It's a small group, folks, so happy for you to just unmute and ask away. No need to dive into the chat. I think it's a nice small group.
Do you think, Paul, that we've, given that we've now moved into the era of technology and it's all on Zoom at the moment, that maybe take away some of the sensitivity of reading that room and understanding, or that emotional intelligence that you might pick up on, or the safety aspect by the technology?
Almost certainly, Shelby, almost certainly. And I think I've seen it perhaps even more worn down now over time. I think it's actually fatigued. I think I've always said that sensitivity is a muscle, and I think you need to exercise it. And I don't think we're having enough opportunities to exercise it at the moment, because we're not seeing people in 3D. It's just weird. When our brains are not used to it, and we can't work as efficiently, we find it tiring. And we find it tiring because we're working harder to try and detect emotions, which is just really tough. And you perhaps even have to be more explicit of asking people how they're feeling rather than trying to detect it, which again involves more safety. You have to have that relationship with someone. You have to be able to. But I found as well, speaking to people on the phone, which it seems to be something of a lost art these days, picking up the phone and ringing someone.
Yeah.
Some people are generally surprised. Why are you ringing me? Why aren't we doing this over Zoom? I said, well, I just thought it'd be nice to ring you up. You get a much better quality of phone line, and you can talk much more naturally. So but I think you're right. I think it's massively desensitized right now.
Yeah. I suppose there has to be a lot of work then that goes back into that, especially then as offices are now deciding it's 50-50 or not at all, it's mandatory. And we now have to navigate this world of reading people in our rooms and navigating the body language, the sensitivity of them, the emotion, the emotional intelligence that you have, they have.
Yeah.
It all plays into part, I think, now, rather than if you've been in an office environment, to be able to see that, poor engagement, poor quality of people around. Yeah, that's the wrong word, but just you feel so much more vibration when you're in a close setting from somebody. You read it better, you can understand it from a different perspective. I found it very strange myself.
The silence is so different, isn't it? In a room, the silence you get on Zoom is deafening, but it's different when you're in a room. That silence is a lot more comfortable. It is a strange thing. Yeah, I agree.
That's a question I was going to ask. So when obviously you ask for volunteers there, sometimes if I do things like that for check-ins or that, it's just like silence, and you almost have to pick on someone. Do you have any tips for getting people to just get involved? And
I think certainly going first helps. So I always make a point of trying to do something myself, or to try and put myself out there first. I think a lot of it is about that vulnerability. If you, as a leader, as a coach, as a facilitator, if you're willing to show that you have a vulnerable side, then you're much more likely to see people that are willing to follow that vulnerability. But I think a little bit of kind of advance notice helps as well. So trying to set people up, saying, I'm going to be looking for some volunteers. You don't just catch people cold, but you're giving people opportunities to warm up to the idea. And just saying, that you don't have to give people the option. It is always an option. Yeah, and it's always tough with relative strangers in the Zoom call. But what I have seen is that, so I run these 5-week improv courses, and the first session is on safety, and you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 strangers doing something on safety, but you can guarantee that when they come to their second session, they're better off for having done the first session. So they're much more willing to volunteer. They're much more willing to, because they know each other. They've bounced a few ideas off each other. It's always going to be odd in this type of environment where you're checking in with people that perhaps you don't work with or see on a daily basis. But yeah, in a team sense, we've got to get better, I think, especially online and on Zoom, at building that sense of safety.
Could you talk more about that safety? I don't I don't know if I have like a specific question, but yeah, if you don't mind talking a little bit more about safety.
Okay, where do I start? So I think safety is something that grows. I think it's something that you need a bit. It's something that can happen organically, but I think it can be hot wired. I think there are things that a facilitator, a scrum master, a leader can do to instill and to create safety and create modes and environments that people can feel safe in. And that doesn't mean to say that everyone has to like each other. That doesn't mean that everyone has to get on, but it has to mean that we feel safe enough that we can say things without necessarily being punished, judged, or it being held against us in the future. We can have an honest conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to invite everyone around for dinner. That's not safety. But I think that is something that really does distinguish for me what I've seen successful teams. They're teams that they feel they can have a conversation about more or less anything without fear of being judged and without fear of being analyzed by their teammates. And I think, so Lencioni talks about something called heavy lifting in his book. He says that these things require heavy lifting, which is like these kind of painful, almost painful meetings where people are establishing their vulnerable elements. And I know we did a lot of, so in some of the advanced courses for Scrum Masters that we've done, we do exercises around what we call journey lines, which is based on Lisa Adkins' work, but basically telling your career story about your highs and lows. So then you can start to understand where someone else in your team has experienced a low point, and you can start to understand a little bit about their sensitivities and their background and what gives them safety, just by exposing that little bit of vulnerability each. So I think it's something that's extremely essential. I know a lot of people have written about psychological safety for a long time based on the original Google study, but yeah, I think it's something that certainly if you want creative ideas, it's very hard to be creative if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel if you feel like your ideas are going to be judged.
And sorry, and I suppose in some way then that if you're the leader and you are vulnerable and you show that side, so if you are open enough to talk about your journey and your highs and your lows, that then should surely in some way show your team that they are safe to talk in that fashion too. And so then the dialect changes, doesn't it? Because it's no corporate. It is, this person showed me a softer side, told me about their life. I'm comfortable now to share something with you.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Shelby. I think historically, traditionally, they would say the word traditionally, but it's not been cool to appear weak. And that goes right through the organization, from even leaders all the way, and that cascades down to the workforce. If it's not, you don't get anywhere. We've all been, people may believe they've been told that your career won't go anywhere by admitting that you're weak or that you've got flaws. But I think for me, you won't get safety if you don't admit your weaknesses and your imperfections, because then no one will need to trust anyone, because we're all completely perfect. Which of course, which of course is just not true.
Yeah.
So
totally. I love that.
Any other questions?
I've got one, but I'll wait to see if anybody else wants to chip in first. I'll leave it for the audience. Any questions, folks?
One comment on safety. It seems rather easy for people who have a supervisor in the room to just say, I like improv, but I'm not going to risk my job by doing something that my boss has in the past kind of shot down.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a sort of a no-brainer. Like it's my livelihood. It's my way of making money. It's my way of getting a promotion. And I wonder if you have any advice for those people.
For the workers or for the boss in that
For the
sense?
Workers.
Yeah. For me, I'd probably try and have an honest conversation with that person, or with that, maybe even with that boss. And this is the thing, is that we all have a story to tell, and we all, as human beings, we're all imperfect. And who can you confide in within that team? And sometimes that safety can come from within. And that's that sense of team, and that sense of family can come from within. And that can be quite reassuring that someone else in that team feels the same way. Yeah, that's potentially, if you're going to confront that you've got a boss that's not really on board with that. A lot of teams do this, do some of the techniques you've seen today in the safety of a retrospective, for instance. That retrospective for me should be a time when a team feels whatever happens in here is just for us, and we can say, and we can have an opinion that's not going to be judged amongst ourselves. And yes, it can be different to what our boss says and what our boss is asking for and expects of us, but that's where safety's got to start, within the people you're working with day to day as a facilitator. And that, for me, that retrospective should be that first safe place for teams to talk. And you never know, if more teams start doing that, maybe that gives more teams the confidence to approach a leader or a boss who's not on board with these things. Maybe. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, the word confide, I think, was powerful. Like, I have one-on-ones with my supervisor, and I think like, if I can confide in him, then I feel safe. Like if I can tell him something that I guess is vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think this reminds me, Roger, of a story of when I used to work at British Telecom, which you might not be aware of, but a big telecoms company in the UK. And we had a buzzword in the office, which was called the comfy chairs, the comfy chair conversation. So basically, when your manager wanted to speak to you, meet me at the comfy chairs, you knew you were going to have either a grilling, or you'd either done something really good, or you'd either done something really bad. So there was this stigma. And I think what my point here is, your environment plays a huge part, even though you might not realize it, into the safety that you have. So, and today's a good example, is that with Zoom, you're getting a little bit of an insight into me, and I'm getting a little bit of an insight into your room. And that can provide safety, but if that safety is not there, it can feel quite like a window into your life that you don't want to share. So I think even that, you've got to be mindful that your environment does have a huge impact on how safe people feel. In an office surrounded by glass, you could feel like you're being watched, or you're being listened to. People are walking past the meeting rooms. So I think, and I've had some of the best conversations with some of my colleagues, bosses, walking through a park. Because you're in a completely isolated place. It's an interesting thing about eye contact. Neither of us were looking at each other, but that, in a sense, allowed a more honest conversation to happen, because it didn't feel like we were eyeballing each other. But we're both walking in the same direction. Similar thing with car journeys. If you go on long car journeys, I've had some of the best conversations with my dad, sat when he was in the passenger seat of a long car journey. You can get quite deep, because it's a safe environment. You're in an enclosed space. No one else can hear you. you're on a journey together, there's a defined outcome, a much more productive conversation. So I think, I'm not sure if it's the answer, but I think your environment plays a huge role in the safety that you feel talking to people that you work with.
Great. Nice. I was just curious about, so these a lot of these techniques you're kind of adopting there and trying to help teams to kind of do various things. It's obviously powerful. I can't help but feel some of the stuff must be really powerful in helping teams that perhaps are really not collaborating very well. So I know some of this also feels good stuff for icebreakers and things like you did at the start, but so have you kind of seen some really good, you must have seen some really good examples of, you know, turning around a team that just wasn't like an effective group to one that became a high performing team through some of this stuff?
Well, I think with any of these things, it takes time, Sath, but I think deliberately sometimes I'm always quite careful of the language, or not careful, but certainly I'm listening to the language that teams use. And I think it does take time, but just trying to approach things in a much more positive way. So positivity is a huge element of an improviser's approach. They're trying to see almost everything as an opportunity rather than as a block. And the improvisers talk about the difference between offers and blocks, constantly looking and listening for offers. And I think we have to try and move. I've seen collaboration occur where we see everything within a team as an opportunity rather than as a problem, rather than as an impediment. You've got to bear in mind, a lot of software teams particularly are inherently engineers. And you know, they come from an engineering background where we want and we thrive on problems. But of course, with problems can come negativity and can come impediments. So certainly trying to view how we work as moving towards a positive outcome and driving people forward. I think that's where you can get some genuine progress, but also when you pay less attention to who gets the credit. I think that's possibly one of the biggest things is, and again, I'm quoting someone that I should know who it is, but the famous quote is, you know, it's amazing what people can achieve when nobody cares who gets the credit. I can't remember, someone will correct me on who that quote comes from.
Donald Trump.
No, I really hope it wasn't. It's someone much more intelligent than that. But no, but yeah, really trying to focus on less, and this is what an improviser's ethos is trying to make other people look good. And all the improvisers that I spoke to, I asked them, who's the best improviser you've ever worked with? And there's a few names that came up, but some of the names were quite obscure, people that you wouldn't have heard of. People like Jim Sweeney and people like Lee Simpson. Not particularly funny people, not the stars, the Hollywood stars of improv. And I asked them why, and they said, oh, they just make you look good. They make me and they make the rest of us look good. They do little things, they set things up. And I think that's the secret. If you can fill a team with people that like setting other people up, you're onto a winner, because that's where collaboration naturally happens, because nobody cares who's taking the credit, as long as we're building towards something great. And you can walk out of a planning session, you can walk out of a meeting, and you don't know who came up with the idea, but it's a good idea. That's the secret sauce, I think, in my view.
I like that. Yeah, no, I think those are when the team is pulling together and it's genuinely unit and they're all kind of driven by this common goal and purpose, right? And it's not about some, you know, individual glory or, you know, that whole individual contributor piece. It's about the whole and the team. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we've got time for maybe one or two other questions. If anyone's got a question for Paul, feel free. Don't be shy, as I say. See a cat's tail there in the corner of your screen, Laurie.
I think it's lovely to see cats and all sorts of things walking across keyboards. I think I've seen a cat walking across Anne's keyboard as well. It's great.
You were talking earlier about the you know, you can obviously see each other's spaces, etc. I remember when we actually did a session with Tobias. Tobias was the guest speaker, and we were talking about various things around COVID and, you know, that shift in various things. But one of the things I I couldn't get past was, you know, we always talk about, you know, bring yourself to work.
Yeah.
I think COVID happened and we really truly had to do that. And
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of positives in that.
Mm.
You kind of got to know each other in a way that perhaps you just never would have done ordinarily. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've seen people where they are, aren't you? And it's very difficult to hide it. And I used to be quite conscious of it in the first few days of, you know, trying to worrying about the slightest noise that the kids are making, and sharing the broadband with 2 kids that are homeschooling. And then you realize actually everyone's in the same boat here. Everyone's got the similar issues at home. So in some respects, it's quite reassuring to know that, and to and to actually name it and to call it. And this was something that Esther Derby said ages ago. But you leave the idea of the core protocol, the check-in, saying this is what's going on for me right now. I'm just gonna put it out with you before we start this meeting. I've got 2 kids running around that won't go to bed. You're probably going to hear them. All these things that are going on for me at home right now. But for now, and here I am. And then you can kind of start. You can kind of let people get that off their chest, and let people name that and call that out. And then it just makes you feel a bit more human.
I do think that, you know, given that we have become a little bit more, the one thing COVID has done, and putting us in Zooms and all the different kind of channels that we have to use, it has made us a bit more human. And it's no longer, I don't see it, the corporate stuffy shirt tie, sit there, you know, very professional. I got, like, no disrespect, tonight I've rocked up in a onesie, but because I'm sick, but you know, the amount of people you see a cat walk across the screen, or a dog or an animal, now that's now acceptable, where before there was still that high level of corporate. You had to look a certain way, have a suit on, put a full face of makeup on. And I think that's the one thing that I do hope is sustainable after, and when we go back into offices, that we can be a bit more human and show a bit more of our human side, because after all, that is there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there will be. I think that sense of struggle and getting through that struggle together, and the only way we've done it is by helping each other out. I think the human element of our work will be a massive part of the next. I think it will go on, like I say, in the next 5 to 10 years. I think we'll be on the back of this. We'll be stronger, more resilient, and hopefully just more in tune with each other. Yeah, which I think we'll certainly be more grateful for when we can spend time together, and, you know, and really making the most of that time, because we've missed it all so much.
Yeah.
Opportunity for a bit of gratitude, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Chance for one, maybe. Yes. Quick question, folks. Not from Shelby.
I could ask loads of questions. I'd be Paul nice, as he knows.
That's all right.
So I don't like people monopolising the question, Shelby. Anybody else got one? Anything of interest? I think I did have another one for you, Paul, but I think I've since forgot.
That's all right. Well, you all know where I am. I'm happy to share my email if anyone wants to.
You later.
The only thing I'd like to share is, going back to one of the earlier speakers, was quite often a technique I use is nobody speaks next until everybody's speaking first in the morning. So to give everybody an equal voice. Yeah.
I like that, Donald. Yeah, absolutely. And giving everyone, even if it's just saying nothing from me or whatever that is, just saying I'm here or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's getting people, and Esther also talks about getting people's voice in the room in the first 10 minutes. And I think that's even more important in Zoom when you're doing it online. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good show. Okay. Any more questions?
Well, like I said, I've dropped my email in the chat window. If anyone does want to get in touch with me or have a chat about anything, that's no problem with that.
Right, cool. And we'll share the details for your upcoming course as well, and the rest of the community. We'll share it in Meetup.
Sure.
Sounds awesome. I'm sure there'll be some interest. So yeah, just to say thanks for coming along today. Been great to host you. Really fun session. Slightly different style to what we normally do, but now it was a lot of fun. A lot of really powerful techniques. So yeah, no, thanks again, Paul.
No problem. Thanks, Seth.
Maybe nice. Great session.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you all for playing along with my games. Thank you very much. It's been great to meet you all.
Shout out to Laurie and Laura and Shelby for participating in
very good. Thank you for volunteering.
You did have one last thing. Did you know one other thing you wanted everybody to do at the end? I forgot. You said something earlier.
Did I?
I thought you did something you were gonna. Oh yeah, I remember you. Maybe you had like a 6-word story thing. No, you showed one earlier.
Oh yeah. If anyone just want to have a crack at a 6-word story, that's a game I played. It's a 3-minute game. See if you can in 3 minutes whether you can come up with a 6-word story. Drop it into the meetup comments if you're happy to share it. Of course, maybe it'll be the next bestseller. Who knows?
The Hibs, best team in Scotland.
Perhaps the best team in Wales.
Let's not get started on rugby, shall we? Let's not do that.
There you go, Paul.
Six Nations.
Very good. Like it, Seth. Very good. Loved it. Excellent. Yeah, really good to meet you all.
Thank you so much. It was a good session.
Thanks, Anne. Nice to meet you. Take care.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you. Really good.
Thanks to you all for joining and being such good sports and participating. Just the usual quick couple of shout outs and announcements. I'm sure you've probably seen them. We've just published our last event for March. So given the number of Wednesdays there are, we did manage to squeeze in one last session for you all. So we've got a great session coming up on the 31st with a chap called Frank Verbruggen, who I do know. I trained under him previously. He used to train in Scrum at Scale. So he does a lot of great stuff in the agile space. He's really into sort of processes, etc. And wrote a great paper with Jeff Sutherland some years ago. He's going to be talking about servant leadership. It's a really cool session. So yeah, he's a really smart chap. So if you're interested in that, do come along and join us for that. It should be really good. We've got another one coming up for you in early April. We're just sort of finalising the details on that one, and we'll get that published. And of course, as many of you see, we've got the wonderful Kim Morgan joining us at the end of April for what looks like a very heavily subscribed session. So yeah, do join us for that if you're interested to hear more from Kim. That's going to be great. And yeah, we've got plenty in the backlog. So Donald and I are working away. And given we've got a couple of minutes, if it's a small group, if anybody else has got anything they'd like to share or shout out for some other event or their own meetup, you're welcome to do so for a close the session. Got anything else you're doing or you'd like people to know about? You're welcome to share. Yeah. So I thought I'd offer. It's a nice small group. Yeah. So thanks again, and yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you happen to be, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donald. All the best, guys.